Welcome to our startup grind here in July. I can't believe it's already July. My goodness. We're very excited to have Jake Miller, the CEO of Toggle Health, with us today. So we got a great interview, just learning more about Jake's background and what led him to Toggle, and even hearing a little bit more about what's in store for them. But before we do that, I want to give a big shout out to Amplify. So if you have not heard, Leap has now rebranded to Amplify, and very excited to hear about that. Larry could not be here today. He's actually on vacation, but at our next startup grind, we're going to have him in for just a few minutes to tell us a little bit about how things have transitioned from Leap to Amplify and what, if anything, that means going to be different going forward for the next 12 months. So look forward to hearing more about that from Larry. And just a big shout out to the Startup Grind team here on the call today. We got Lisa Bajornes, who's been a huge asset both here in our community, but also to the Startup Grind team in Austin. Likewise, he is just always the guy behind the scenes, manning the Zoom calls and making everything go smoothly, so whoever's doing the interviewing and moderating can do that well and focus on that. So just a couple of house things here before we get started with the interview. If you are here and not involved in the interview or don't have a question, please keep your mic muted so we've got good audio back and forth and everyone can hear. We are going to have a Q&A at the end. So if you have a question for Jake that you would like us to get to, please post that in the chat. Austin's going to be monitoring those, and then we will make sure that we're able to get as many of those done towards the end. So with that, we're going to go ahead and get started here. So Jake, first of all, thanks for taking the time to join us today. We greatly appreciate it. I know you're very busy.
No problem. Yeah.
Yes.
Now, I do have to give you a little forewarning. It turns out both my wife and I have these conference calls at the same time. She let me keep the light ring, though, so you can actually see me and not look too pasty. But you may hear some dogs in the background if they escape. So yeah, you guys are all used to it by now.
No worries. No worries. Hey, that's a part of Zoom culture now, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So, all right. Well, Jake, I know you know some of the people here on this call, or they know you. But what I'd like to do is just get some idea about your professional background and what was the catalyst for you creating Toggle Health.
Yeah, so I started off my career in product development. I went to school here locally at Bellarmine. I was a chemist, and I scored probably what most people consider the awesomest internship. I was in the beverage lab at Brown-Forman. And at the time, they were developing Jack Daniel's country cocktails and early times and Jack Daniel's and all these other beverages. And I got to work on that, and it was a lot of fun. And got to bring back all the free samples, which was under 21, so I don't know exactly how that worked. But anyways, it was a lot of fun. So I decided I wanted to do that. So my senior year, I worked full time with a startup that did consulting in that world. And I was the number 3 or number 4 employee on folding chairs in the condo basement, and decided to make that my career for the first 4 or 5 years. And then after that, went on and wanted to flex my chemistry muscles, so I got into biotech. There was a local biotech firm called Advanced Chemtech developing protected amino acids and peptides for pharmaceutical research. And that was an awesome rush. And during that time, the SARS epidemic hit. And if you guys remember, this is like 20 years ago, but it was very similar to what's happening right now with the coronavirus. It didn't get nearly as big, but the fear was definitely there. And I was 20 something. I was put in charge of scaling these 3 peptides that they weren't even going to test. They were just going to start injecting into people with the hopes that it could save hundreds of thousands. And I was put in charge of this project, managing all these PhDs. And I was like, hey, healthcare is pretty cool. This is so much better than developing the next Crystal Pepsi. I'm going to go back and focus my career on healthcare. And so I wanted to be on the business side. So I went down to Vanderbilt, got my MBA, focused on healthcare, and had my 3rd child while I was in my MBA program, and decided I had to pay some bills. So I went up to Philly and worked in pharmaceutical marketing services, which is just as exciting as it sounds. But I was really good at it. I could really sell drugs well. The only trouble is I was selling a lot of drugs that people didn't really need. They were like copycat drugs and things like that. And I was desperate to go more entrepreneurial. And I got a call out of the blue from Target Corporation when I was looking around. And this is the stores. And Target was starting up retail clinics. And they're on the cutting edge. This is about 2006. So I decided to change over my career and focus on that. And I took a job with them. Come to find out, they liked the fact that I had retail experience. I always thought it would be a detriment going into healthcare, but they couldn't find many people in the healthcare space that understood retail. And the fact I had consumer packaged goods background really benefited me. And they also thought that if the clinics bombed, that they could just stick me in the beverage buying part of the business. And so luckily we succeeded. We got it up to 30 sites in a couple states, or 31. And then I was one of 6 people running their $4 billion pharmacy business. And that was crazy. But I was banging my head against the wall constantly because Target at the time wasn't very innovative. It was very top down.
Mm-hmm.
And I was trying to do a bunch of crazy innovative things with this cool business. And I started researching other innovative practices to try to bring those into Target. I found out about Walgreens innovation team, and they ended up recruiting me. I was brought on board to turn around their 400 something retail clinics, moved out to Philly, did that for a while. We did all kinds of crazy things. We created a clinical trial retail program. I love that job. It's fantastic. We launched 11 new products in 18 months and raised the total revenue of the business by 18%. We just kicked ass. And I learned how to manage a portfolio of new innovations and launch those, but they went through a merger and they cut all the cool stuff that we were working on because it wasn't core, even though it was doing great. And so it's like, man, this sucks. But then I got a call from Humana and I got a chance to come home and work on a brand new clinical process. And I got to be behind the lines with insurance, which I hadn't worked with before. So I launched a couple of insurance products at South Florida market. We're getting ready to break ground on 2 12,000 square foot facilities. Everything was going well. I had 70 something people working with me on this project. And then they announced a merger with that, as we all know, didn't go through. And so I was like, man, this has happened twice now. I was working, kicking butt, doing all this stuff that's really cool. But it didn't go to fruition because the corporate winds blew. And so I decided I was going to go out on my own, do my own thing. So I consulted for a while. I was looking around. I then started working with Accelerate Health locally. And I was mentoring some companies. And I started mentoring one of the guys with the base technology for Toggle. And he actually had to put it on the shelf for about a year, 9 months, because he ran out of money. And I kept encouraging him. And as I would consult, I would start talking to more surgeons. And I started getting really excited about the problem that he was solving. And I ended up creating Toggle Health, taking on the technology. And now Tim is a mentor to me. He's an advisor to the company. And I'm the founder, which is kind of crazy.
Yeah.
And I did that part-time for about a year and a half. Been doing it full-time for about a year and a half, on and off, as I'll tell you in the story. But it's been a cool, crazy, wild ride.
Yeah. Well, what a unique background of so much diverse, different types of work and stuff like that. How do you think working in all those different fields, from the marketing to the product development, retail, healthcare, how do you think working in those different environments, those different industries, prepared you to lead or be well positioned to lead a startup?
I'll tell you what I thought going into it, and it was probably one of my biggest learnings. I thought, since I had worked in almost every part of healthcare, that I would be able to learn this part as quickly, and it took a lot longer to learn the operative space. Toggle, just for you guys that don't know, we connect surgeons to their digital data when they're operating. It's a lot like a Roku or Apple TV for an operating room. Surgeons have all this crazy technology, but they're sterile and they can't get to the stuff that helps them to control their imaging or turns out all their other digital information that they really need when they're operating. It'd be like you being in your office and not being able to touch your cell phone or your computer and only being able to look at it across the table. And so, what was really interesting about this whole thing is I'd worked in almost every part of healthcare except for the operating room. And I was like, cool, steep learning curves. I love those. Taken all kinds of crazy challenges in the past, but I also had corporate resources behind me when I was doing it. So a lot of that was a lot easier back then. And it took a little bit longer to break in than I thought. Actually, during this process, I know Lisa and a few others know this story. It was so bad that I decided to sign up for a perioperative nursing class. Perioperative means everything around the operating room, pre, intra, and post. And Bellarmine College sent me home this brochure And it was like how to learn French and Microsoft Word and go to France with us. And in the middle it said get a certificate in perioperative nursing, and said no prerequisites on the front of this brochure. And I knew it was for registered nurses only, but I went ahead and signed up for the course, and then they didn't kick me out. I guess I don't know why they didn't. They should have. And I ended up getting 32 hours of intraoperative observations done, and it really changed how we started directing the product and what it looked like. But I made some assumptions about how much I knew going in. I had to deprogram a lot. Even though I was more of a small business startup-y guy, I started my career that way. I'd had I don't want to say innovation knocked out of me. I was always trying that stuff, but I had to unlearn a lot of big corporate things. And a lot of the things I'd learned along the way that I thought would be so handy are very useful once you're starting to scale your business. But when you're looking for product market fit, I still had a lot to learn. And in fact, one of the major learnings I had out of this whole process is that I tried to bootstrap prior to full product market fit, which we still haven't quite found yet. We have some opportunities coming up relatively soon based on some recent learnings. But yeah, that whole product market fit, if you start to fuel your rocket ship, if you just start to put gas in that thing before you have product market fit, you're pretty much putting it into an unfinished ship, and you're really creating a bomb. The thing's just going to blow up on you. And that learning about how to find the correct insights about the customer and then how to build the stuff right were my biggest learnings. And I way underestimated the challenge with doing that, because I'd built teams, I'd scaled services, I'd scaled physical products before. I thought I knew what I was doing. It was close enough, but it was an eternity away. And I had to learn those hard lessons. The good news about bootstrapping during all that is that I did that on tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands, not tens of millions and hundreds of millions of dollars. I could have really blown a lot of cash with what I thought I knew.
Yeah, so it's interesting you even shared that there, because I wanted to ask you, it sounds like in your corporate career, you were very entrepreneurial. You were launching new products, doing things, but it's always different when you're bootstrapping it or doing it on your own from a startup. So do you think those experiences of developing those new products in that corporate environment, was that a help or was that a hurt? I mean, obviously, so you've had to unlearn some things and do it a little bit differently, but are there parts of that corporate experience that you have been able to translate to the startup that have really been helpful? Or have you had to really just be done with almost all that and start anew and really focus on a product market fit because you didn't have the millions of dollars at this point figuring out how to do that?
Yeah, the analogy I'm going to use is one. I like watching YouTube videos about survivalists and stuff. I don't know why. Like I'll turn those on and go to sleep to them. My wife complains because YouTube keeps playing all night. And eventually the selection rotates over to some guys speaking Japanese, and she wakes up at 3 a.m. and turns off my phone or my TV. Yeah, but one of the interesting things about that is you could take somebody who is from the States and put them in sub-Saharan Africa, and they're going to die because even with the skills, they don't understand the terrain, or they misread or misinterpret. But you take somebody from that area that is attenuated to that, it's grown up in the cultures, has learned the unspoken rules, and has followed their parents' footsteps, and they know exactly what to do and how to do it. I would say that they're just two different animals. If you're doing innovation in a large corporate world, you have to know that the majority of the people within that organization, most of the organizations I was working in had hundreds of thousands, up to 300,000 employees. They're bureaucrats, and they're there, and their job is to survive. They have a fantastic job, a great pay, good bonus, it's stable. They're there for stability, probably in middle management because not many people make it to the top. And their entire job is to avoid risk and to make incremental gains. It's about stability and making sure you deliver on your numbers. Whereas the entrepreneurial world is fundamentally different. It's about not making basis point change, but percentage point changes. And you just don't see that much of that in corporate America. Mm-hmm. So once you start to understand the different beasts and the different players, they really are different animals or different ecosystems. and each of them have their specialties. I think it took me a little bit longer to do the training because I was doing early stage innovation in a large company, and because I'd worked as an employee in an entrepreneurial company or two and worked with a bunch of entrepreneurs. I thought I understood it. Until I became a founder, I did not understand jack. And in fact, I have recommendations for any of you guys considering being a founder. If someone hasn't built shit from scratch before, discount whatever they're saying by 90%. Just take 90% straight off the top. Know that they're giving you advice and they may have a perspective, but they don't know what they're doing. In fact, most of us on this call don't know what we're doing. We're faking it every day because we're in a new space. You know, there's some very successful people on this call. I see them, but you know, if you ask somebody about advice about your business or your space, et cetera, they can give you something, but you really need to talk to the builders. And there aren't very many builders in big companies. They're just not there. They're different animals. So yes, it was very useful. The deprogramming is absolutely necessary, and the absolute need to understand you're in a different ecosystem and that your survival is dependent on you figuring out where your source of water is, where your food is, what kind of shelter you can build. It's different, and it's dangerous for guys like me that are in the mid 40s with experience doing some stuff to do this. But you know, there's also been a lot of stats lately showing that guys like me are some of the more successful entrepreneurs.
That's right.
Because we've fought some wars on other people's dimes. So yeah, you get a lot of experience, but the context is dangerous.
Yeah. Well, I love your analogies that you've given here. It really, I think, helps give a good word picture of what entrepreneurship is like, especially going through, you know, a startup and building that. So you mentioned that part of this, all of us that have innovative ideas and are starting something like what you're doing here, we have to get really comfortable being uncomfortable and being humble enough to say that we don't know when we're trying to figure it out. What kind of transition was it like for you to get comfortable in that kind of environment, coming from the corporate world where you had a lot of things backing you and money and stuff like that, where you knew you were out there and you just had to figure it out and go find those next steps? Was that a big transition for you? And if so, what helped you get comfortable working in that sense of uncertainty and just not knowing?
I'm I'm somebody who likes to research the hell out of something before I jump in and I start doing it. That could be a deficit in our world. I heard somebody say at one point that the kids that were straight A students in school have the hardest time being entrepreneurs sometimes. Because straight C's is kicking ass in our world. It's just, it's like, you know, that's like doing really well. And I was a kid who
I beg to differ, Jake.
I don't know, man. It's you know, you straight B's, maybe straight B's. But yeah, so the biggest problem in our space is startup porn or out of context advice. In the Midwest, especially, we have a lot of out of context advice. We have people who haven't built stuff from scratch or have a very limited meta view of deals and things like that try to give you advice, and it's weighted too heavily, and it's really dangerous. The other thing is the startup porn. It's the stuff from Y Combinator where, hey, if you're not 18-year-olds and eating ramen noodles and not hustling, the hustle porn, if you're not out there killing it every day, things don't work. It took a while to figure out what was legit and what wasn't. The advice that I like the best right now, I'd recommend it to everybody here. Mike Maples has a new podcast, and he's coming out with a kind of a primer for early stage companies, which I think is fantastic. I could probably give you the link to it after this, but yeah, he says it well. He's like, and he talks to the guys like, who is it? Steve Blank. He interviews him a couple times. And he talks about entrepreneurs being more akin to artists than anything else, and how we're really creating something from nothing, and how, and this was something that took me a while to finally get, but once he said it, it rang true. Is like, you know, we don't have businesses when we start. We're a startup. We're not a business. We're trying to turn this into a business.
Yeah.
You know, we're trying to take that insight, turn that insight into something where we could see if somebody's eyes light up or not, and then hopefully create a business model around it to capture some of the value that we're creating. It's a totally different thing. And it takes a while to dig through the stuff that's out there and find the stuff that's really relevant, that tells you how to do it well. And if you're somebody like me who wants to find something that's closer to more definitive, yeah, I truthfully, I drug my feet too long trying to find it because I kept finding conflicting information. Hell, I moved myself and a couple of my team members down to Austin, Texas for 3 to 4 months trying to figure it out somewhere else. Turns out everybody in Austin has the same problem that we do trying to figure it out. You know, they look at Silicon Valley, they're like, wish we were like those guys. And we look at Austin and go, wish we were like those guys. Yeah, I did figure out where all the good brisket places were. So I have to say that. But no, I've screwed up left, right, and center with this business. It's kind of amazing. I like steep learning curves. This was steeper than I thought. The good news is that I've gained incredible insights, made fantastic contacts, and I'm in a point now where I have the way that I want to construct this and make the next bet. I think this bet is a really good one based on all our learnings.
Wow. And so let me ask you, I know that you said before that, you had the person who had the prototype that you guys are now working with. I'm curious, can you share or give us some kind of idea on how much the prototype or the initial idea has changed from when you first got your hands on it to where it is now? Is it a lot different based on the market research and feedback you're getting, or was it pretty close right out of the gate?
It was the aha moment about parts of it were there at the very beginning, which is what turned me on about it. I saw it as a platform instead of just a one-off product. The original product was inspired by high-end automobile interfaces. And so if you think about it, it's like 3 to 5 years ago, you're driving a BMW or Lexus down the road and you have some type of LCD display up. And the hypothesis was, hey, if you can help someone control something driving 100 miles an hour down the road and make it highly intuitive, that this will work in a surgical space. One of the articles that I send out and I quote the most right now is about the US Navy currently taking all of the it's like iPad-like controls out of their major ships at a cost of hundreds of millions of dollars, because they realize that when you're in a higher information environment where stuff's just coming at you, you need tactile control. It's how the human mind works. So the big hypothesis around that is that's exactly what the surgeons needed. They needed tactile control in the sterile field, which is right by the patient when they're operating, because of this massive amount of data and the sheer pressure that they're under when they're doing this. And that was there at the beginning. It was a wired, clunky, giant prototype. It was made on some technology that wasn't quite that great. So we worked really hard to make it wireless, get out some tests. We did dozens of iterations to make sure the ergonomics were right. And then we got down to Austin, Texas, and we started working with some folks, and we had a major scare around our regulatory pathway. Somebody told us it was much more onerous. So we paused for a while. And then finally, we came to the realization at the end of it that we're really hardware-enabled software. And that was the big thing. It's like, yeah, our device where we had the patent protection, we've been spending all this time building the team going in this one direction. It's really, yeah, that's a necessary component, but it's really about the stuff that the surgeon can get to. It's not about how they can get to it. That's the necessary component. If you think about your Roku, that controller is cool. They did a really nice job on the controller for the Roku. But it's really about getting to Netflix and Hulu and making sure that you can see your next episode of, I don't know, whatever the next thing is that you want to watch on TV. Surgeons, it's very analogous. And so that was a major change for us. It took me a while. I was working really diligently with one individual that had come highly recommended that I thought could be my CTO and help us on the software. Really wasted 4 or 5 months on that entire process until I found the right group. And the group that we're currently working with right now is pretty fantastic. And I'm excited to say we'll probably have an announcement relatively soon about investment in the company and a new partnership regarding that part of what we're doing. In the meantime, we've also had great conversations with some of the top med device companies in the country about what we're doing. One of the great benefits, I was super worried when all this went down. A bunch of you guys on the call were probably even part of this, but we were creating a hard tech group, which was going to take a bus trip up to Indianapolis, and we are going to meet with, while we are up there, something around 25 to 35 investors. And then we are already getting requests from other cities to meet with dozens of other investors with this group of 25 different hard tech entrepreneurs from the region. And then coronavirus hit. We've been planning it for months, and we had to kill the whole thing right at the beginning of April. It just died. And I was in the dumps. I was like, what are we going to do? I had started to line up a bunch of angel investors, and they were super excited, like, okay, let's get this going. Let's use this to kick off. And everything just fell apart. And the angel investors did too. They saw the stock market take a dive by 30 or 40%, whatever it was, and they just went away. And so I was like, man, what's going to happen? And then I started talking to some investors that helped to keep me going during this period. They're like, man, you may want to look at this again, because you're all about sterility and the sterile field. And even though you don't directly do anything with coronavirus, the world has just had a massive education about why microbes and why you need to be sterile and what that looks like, and you should take advantage of it. And so I started talking to more and more people out there, and it was crazy because they were exactly right. So it went from, this is a massive, I was about to cuss, it's massive bad thing. And all of a sudden it's like, hey, this could be a once in a lifetime thing for you, and you need to take advantage of it quickly. I don't know where we started with that question, but yeah, I just wanted to share that it was amazing, the frame change that took place during this whole coronavirus thing for us.
Yeah. So one of the things, so Jake, your feedback, sharing your experience has been fantastic, and you're answering literally every single one of my interview questions here before I even have to answer them. So I love interviews like this. But one of the things that I'm hearing that you're continually harping on is the importance of the product market fit and customer validation. And even there, you came up with this new idea, this new pivot based on talking to people. And when we get started, so often it's literally about talking to people and understanding. So tell us a little bit about what you've learned in the process of doing the customer discovery conversations or the product market fit. Do you have a specific approach you took to doing this? Is it any big revelations through this process, or did you learn how to do this during your time at corporate?
It was interesting. I actually learned a little bit while I was in corporate. Humana, when I got brought on board, I was supposed to turn around their 300 something on-site clinics that were part of this company called Concentra. And they had a whole nother division of the company that made up another 2/3 of the clinic business. But I was supposed to take about 1/3 of it and turn it into this transformational model. And then I was there for 3 months. It just moved my family back into town. And my boss said, hey, I need you to take a pause on this project. Go, pause. What's going on? And she goes, oh, it's just a pause. I go, yeah, this looks exactly like the pause that we took when I was at Walgreens, where they divested this business. She goes, yeah, I'm busted. So they ended up selling the Concentra business, the thing I've been brought on board for. And I had to figure out, what the hell am I going to do? You know, should we have even been doing this in the first place? Or was this something that the business was just going after? And so I took this kind of hotshot group. Remember the old show, The A-Team?
Oh,
Well,
yeah.
I kind of got to build the A-Team out. So I had a couple good people on my team. And then there was this corporate innovation-ish type group that was all about design, and there were a couple other folks I got to pick. Maggie Galloway, by the way, was one of the team members. She was part of the corporate innovation team. She was working on InScope at the time and getting about 3 hours of sleep at night. She was by far the most brilliant person on the team. But she's one of the team members too. And we just figured out, we took 6 weeks and we interviewed a bunch of folks, figured out what was out there. And we learned this process, and we ended up creating a brand new business for the company, and then started pursuing that before the merger went through about 1.5 years later. So I started learning the lean process at that point, and how to do Steve Blank's stuff. And then I took it from there, and I've been trained on it multiple times. The best thing that's out there right now, I swear, guys, you got to take a look at it, is Mike Maples' interview with him and how he goes about his process. And one of the things within Maple's process that I'm totally stealing, he talks about this 2x2 matrix where he goes, okay, are you right or are you wrong with your idea? And then are you consensus or are you non-consensus? And the big thing that most entrepreneurs, especially in the Midwest, don't quite get is that you have to be right in order to make outsized amounts of money, but you also have to be non-consensus, because otherwise everybody else and the brother is going to be there doing it already, or you're never going to be able to make that much money. And truthfully, people that are very conservative, some of the investors in our area, they don't understand how to make non-consensus bets. And the ability to frame a non-consensus idea in such a way that people want to take a bet on it and get outsized returns is a talent that, luckily I've been able to glean from some of the folks on this call, and some of the folks that are just out there by hook or by crook. But that hey, you're right and you're non-consensus is really uncomfortable place to be, but it's where you got to be if you're going to make money. If you're right, you're consensus, you may as well be I don't know, running a law firm or something like that. You're never going to make out, you'll make great rent money, but you're never going to make outsized returns.
So let's talk about that. That's a good question. What is the driving force behind what you're doing with Toggle Health? Is it you're looking to build something and have a big exit? Are you looking to specifically solve a problem? What is it that motivates you to make this happen?
Yeah, so I started, so I'm going to go back. This is like one of the good things. Paul Graham, I kind of have a love-hate relationship with. He's the YC guy. Sometimes he's total startup porn. And then you end up going down the trail and you reread what he says and you're like, man, he's right. What was the question again? I'm sorry, I just derailed.
No worries. Basically, what is your motivation and your why behind Toggle?
Yeah. So one of the things that he comes up with is you really just have to be nerdy about the problem. You just got to kind of love the problem and dig in. And I love this space. It didn't start out that way. I started out because I'd launched all these products. I'm like, holy crap, this business model is good. It's got a recurring revenue model. I like this. I love the problem space. It's a big, meaty problem. When we saw the surgeons coming up with all the workarounds to figure out how to do this, with two different hospitals, 3 different surgeons that we interviewed had nurses printing out low resolution color images and taping them to the wall of the operating room for them to reference because they couldn't access the imaging on their own screens. They were uploading the images illegally against HIPAA to their own iCloud accounts and downloading them to their personal iPads wrapped in a couple layers of sterile plastic and smearing blood on the images that they wanted to see. They were just doing all kinds of craziness. I'm like, okay, big meaty problem. They're going to all kinds of extents to solve this themselves. I like the healthcare space. Let's do it. And it's a platform play with a good recurring revenue model. I like this. Let's make this bet. But then it was that Paul Graham nerdiness thing where it's like, man, this problem is cool. And then I see the other, you get deeper and you start seeing the nuanced stuff. And that's what's kept me in it. Because truthfully, your reason would say, man, you should have given up by now. One of the mentors I like the best said something really wise. And I've talked to a bunch of people and the gruff ones are just like, oh, that's stupid. But I think it's true is that companies end, or they find the end of their life because founders quit. Now, it could be that the founders quit because they run out of money. Could be because they stupidly pursued in a quixotic fashion this problem. But I think a lot of times it's, man, they're just tired or they're not turned on by the problem. Mm-hmm. And, the Paul Graham thing where it's like, this space is so cool. I've seen literal miracles happen in the operating room where someone has taken off the majority of someone's face and then removed the cancer and then replaced the face in such a way that you could barely see a scar. I've seen people's internal organs taken out and set that. I mean, when you see this stuff, it's like, I want to make these folks better. I know that they're going to be operating on myself or my mom or my dad. And if I can make it a little bit better, yeah, and their worlds in certain ways suck so bad. I mean, they're making a ton of cash. They had to give up a lot to get there. But, they have like 1990s technology in their operating room, even though they have, a super amount of money at home. It's, if I can make their lives better, I know it will affect a lot of people down the road. And that's inspiring to me. And I love the problem space and I find it cool. I think you got to have that nerdy fascination with what you're doing. It can't just be about the money.
Well, it's interesting when you were talking about what the surgeons are going through and the opportunity and the stuff they've seen, your face lit up when you were talking about, and that passion just exuded through. And I mean, it was just amazing how that came out in your expression and your tone and stuff like that. So it's something that everyone in this call could hear how fired up you are about that. So that was really cool.
And this,
so,
Adam, just really quickly, this goes back to your earlier question. One of the main places where innovation comes is through mashups. It's these areas where you take something from another world and you place it into a new one. I think this is really where, now that I've gained the base level knowledge of the space that I've needed, I'm able to take a lot from these other worlds and just add a ton of value. And coming at it a little bit with toddler's eyes, with new eyes, allows me to bring innovations that they're just not thinking about, that they're just blind to. They're in their ruts that they see day in and day out. 80% of it's running on their subconscious. They just go in and do it. Somebody like me coming in can really add value in that way.
Sure, absolutely. Sometimes having those outside eyes looking in from an industry where you haven't been in before, there's so much that you can see that others can't who are in it. So
yeah, but I think the startup porn misstates this quite a bit, because they'll say, just go in, you got brand new eyes, you're going to come up with new crazy ideas. You can't solve something from within, but they back it up with $10 million. and these guys are making mistakes, and it's like, wow, yeah, you can make those types of mistakes if you have that type of financial backing. For the level of financing that we see in the middle of the country, I think we need a little bit of subject matter expertise. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, for anybody out there starting a company, I would make sure that you have a little bit more of that than the space I started in when I started. I loved learning it, but you're going to need the $10 million otherwise.
So let me ask you this. We've talked about startup porn, mentioned it multiple times throughout this conversation. Yep. So the startup porn, is it more hurtful than helpful in that, it's obviously encouraging a lot more people to at least get in the game or whatever, but do you think that it's encouraging people to get in the game either A, for the wrong reasons, or is it attracting people who should not be getting in the game?
I think it's for a very particular set of companies that it's appropriate to, and to either find the people who can advise you on when it's appropriate to your situation, or for you to learn it takes a little while. Okay. There's a couple things I recommend that we do to gain that knowledge. One is continue to have successful entrepreneurs in our community that are building great companies that we can learn from. Jennifer's on the line. She's been so generous with her information. It's very specific to her world, but she's been there and done that and hustles. She's a couple years ahead of the rest of us, and we can learn a lot from her. The other thing is sending people outside. You got Stephen Plappert here, who's done Techstars now twice. I myself did Match Challenge and figured that out with my team. Having said that, that probably wasn't the best accelerator for us. It was good at the time. It taught us some stuff, but you can go outside and get some of that information in. I think what we really need in our community is meta knowledge. We need people that see 20 deals a year that are working on this. They need to be the law firm that's doing somewhere between 15 and 30 of these. The account C that focus mostly in this area. We need more of those folks that can give us meta knowledge about what's taking place. But we're starting to get that with our entrepreneurial community. You got Steven, who will sit down and just walk through your financial model with you based on the knowledge that he's gleaned, not just from Techstars, but from the networks that he has from the cohorts that he's worked with. And it just takes a while to build up. So I'm going back to what you originally asked. Does it do more harm than good? I think that out of context advice does more harm than good many times. And that it's the entrepreneurial's job to use judgment to understand if it applies to the context of what you're about. I could tell you right now that there's been a lot of conversations out in the space about whether people should do accelerators now or not. Is it worth giving up 6 to 8% of your company's equity at the very beginning for the stage? And one of the things that you get through an accelerator is this information. Well, can you go to startup school, or can you go to Mike Maples' podcast and figure out a good bit of it yourself, not have to give that up? Are there ways of tapping into networks outside of accelerators that do this? There's a lot of conversations about that. I think these types of tools are one of the ways of figuring out what the right way is. I don't know. I feel like I've gone through enough of it at this point that I have referenced, like there's 5 or 6 things that I could go to or point people to that I feel like are a better way to look at it, to where they are the right tools and they'd be very helpful. But it's all contextual. It's totally different if you're running a beverage business than if you're running a university spinoff in biotech.
Right.
I don't know if I answered your question well.
No, you absolutely did. So, all right. So here's what we're going to do. We've got about 13 minutes left. In the comment here, Jake, somebody said you have been dropping truth bombs all along. You absolutely have. And entrepreneurs, whether they're in the game or just starting up, I mean, this has been fantastic. So here's what we're going to do. I would still want to do the rapid fire questions, but I'm just going to do 5 of them because we've got some amazing questions from the audience that I want to make sure that we're able to get to. So here we go. I'm going to just ask 5 quick questions, and it's usually a 1-word, 1-sentence response to this. So here we go. Number 1, cards, cats, or other?
I'm married into a cards family. I grew up true blue, so I'm going to have to go with cards on this one. Just
all right.
To keep the family.
Got it.
Stuff going okay.
Taco or burrito?
Oh, definitely taco. Yeah. That's part of the Austin influence. Breakfast tacos, especially. You got to go breakfast taco.
What is the worst place you could imagine getting stuck?
Holy cow. That is a great freaking question. It would, for me, I'm a horrible swimmer, so it would probably be out in the middle of the ocean somewhere on I don't know. I could just see being stranded out there and some freaking shark coming at me. Okay. Next question. Let's do this.
Favorite sport?
Volleyball. So my wife and I, we still play sand volleyball. We got our daughter sucked into the world now. So I'll see Plappert out there occasionally for you.
All right, last one. Favorite superhero and why?
Oh, dude, I love this question. So first off, I have this hypothesis that everybody has a superpower, and it may be like a super small superpower, but I got to tell you guys this story because it's hilarious. So I led a small team at Target, and I was doing this thing where I need everybody to tell us their superpower. It could be the stupidest thing, like you snap your fingers really quickly, whatever it is. And this one lady in the group goes, I can run on all 4s really quickly. And we're like, there is no way you could do this. And she gets down on all 4s and she takes off across the room like a cheetah. So I say people have superpowers, but some people actually do. I think she could have been a superhero. It was the craziest thing I've ever seen. So, but let's see, who's favorite superhero and why? I'm a big Spider-Man fan. He's pretty cool. I'm going that route.
Awesome.
And why? I don't know. He's got shoots webs. So I always like that. The web shooter.
All right. Very good. Well, thank you for that. So we're going to start with the questions. This first one comes from Lisa. And she said that, well, you say the bed is ready and the structure of the company is set now. Where are you with the product and what's the next major milestone?
Yeah, so our goal is to be on the market sometime either end of first quarter next year, beginning of second quarter. And we are currently in development with our prototype on the software side. We're almost complete with the first phase of that, and we're going to go into a secondary phase of the application. And we're re-ramping up the physical prototype because it does have a regulatory component class 1, 510K exempt, we have to lock in that design and get moving. But since we've been bootstrapping, we've really been focused on one of those components at a time. I'm getting ready to start to rock and roll and just doing both in parallel because we have the right team to do that. And it took a while to find them, but.
Okay, excellent. All right, so this question comes from Steven. I've always been impressed by your grit and ability to find a way to keep Toggle moving forward and survive despite not raising a ton of cash. Finding creative ways to survive until you thrive is so important in building a company. And I'd love to know what advice you'd have for me and other founders in terms of creative ways to keep our companies alive until we get the right amount of traction to either generate revenue, investment, or extended runway.
I feel like I should be asking you this question, Steven. You've done it a couple times around, man. The thing that I'm learning right now is that if you're bootstrapping, using your own cash and maybe some grants like I've done to this point, it's very easy to throw the throttle back a little bit and not push as hard. As soon as you start taking in other people's money, especially going beyond the angel phase, I believe, I haven't done that myself yet, but I think you're beholden to outside interests. And while it feels like you're losing a little bit of freedom, there's also a level of accountability. I would say here's where I think I screwed up with my type of product, especially one with the physical component, is trying to get to product market fit on my own. It took me way too long. I should have brought in outside money and made multiple iterative attempts, some in parallel, to move faster. Now, having said that, I wouldn't know what I need to know right now to be successful. I'm having a hard time answering this because you should absolutely try to bootstrap as long as possible, but you also gotta, did you guys ever watch that movie or read the book, The Martian? I think the character's name is Mark Watney. What we all have in the startup world is a Mark Watney problem. It's, you gotta engineer the F out of this. You need enough oxygen, enough food, and enough water to survive until you can get somebody to pick you up on that rocket ship. And it's a real balance, man. I've done it because I saved up like crazy. I got some grant money. I was able to get some partners to work with me relatively inexpensively who were relatively talented and had a lot of potential to grow. I would say my biggest mistake was not bringing in money soon enough. I've lost some talent over time, like people who've moved on, et cetera, because the speed wasn't fast enough. And I'd say that that's the thing that I don't want to say regret the most, but it's probably my biggest learning is that you as a charismatic leader can set a vision and get people super excited and give them a little bit of equity and et cetera, et cetera. But at the end of the day, they have base needs and you have to address that as a leader. And one of your core jobs is to bring in those resources. And when I was bootstrapping, because I was trying to get to product market fit before bringing in outside resources, I took too long with some of those folks and I ended up losing some potential valuable partners. They were still friendly, but they couldn't wait around. They had other opportunities. And if you're bringing in A-level talent or a potential level talent, because you can't really afford A-level talent, you have to bring in people with A potential. They're only going to stick around as long as they see things moving. And one of my biggest mistakes, because I was bootstrapping, was the throttle on momentum was going up and down. And I've lost the momentum a couple times. I had to work hard to get it going again. And momentum is everything in our world. All we are at the beginning is just a story.
Okay, very good.
Yeah, but in your defense, Jake, you also didn't waste money on dry holes. I mean,
Oh, that's true.
I mean, I can speak to it. You raise a lot of money and you end up chasing a lot of rabbits down a lot of dry holes. And by bootstrapping it, you kept that in-house and you controlled all that. You didn't end up going down those roads.
Yeah. And I was talking to one of my mentors the other day, and one of the real positives, he goes, "Listen, you're still alive, man. You're like, there are a lot of companies that have flamed through a lot of cash and burned that up. So yeah, it's a real positive. The other thing I have to say, Adam, with this, I would encourage entrepreneurs that are thinking of taking the leap. the guy who's the guy who writes Dilbert. A lot of people don't like him politically, but he wrote this book that Scott Adams. So Scott Adams wrote this book, and it's something along the lines of how to win without ever succeeding. And he has this thing he calls talent stacks. And the big thing with him is, just make sure whatever you're going into that you increase your talent stack. And for me, I had big gaping holes around healthcare in the hospital and operative space. I'd worked in them, but I wanted to learn more. I also had never really worked with great software or hardware developers. I'd worked with bad ones in my past at big corporations. You don't get great technologists at retailers, to tell you the truth. It's not like Google or Facebook. So I'd worked with folks before, but I didn't really know the space. And so one of the great things about doing what we do is you really increase your talent stack. It's kind of like that one time Target gave me a call out of the blue, and they wanted me because I'd worked in beverage development. They were looking for healthcare people that were different. I think that all of us have an incredible, most of us are going to fail. Most startups don't succeed, but we can succeed in growing our talent stacks. And I could tell you there's a lot of really talented people on this call right now. I could see your faces, and that's the big positive. Thanks, Lee. I was probably sounding like Debbie Downer there for a little bit, but that's the thing that you get. You're going to be more valuable at the end of this, no matter what. And I made sure I was in a space where I would be more well-rounded.
Got it. All right. So final question here.
Nice.
And this comes from Ilya. What is your take?
Ilya. Hey, man.
Yeah. What is your take on MVP launch with a customer and the relative readiness the product has to be at? With pure SaaS, it's more simple. You can launch with a minimal platform and build on it continuously. It's more complicated and costly with the physical hardware component. Do you err on the side of waiting to launch until the product is fully functional and robust, or are you in favor of launching as quick as possible to start getting immediate feedback even before the product is ready?
Yeah, and this is one where I was too conservative in the space. I feel like you should launch that old thing that they talk about where you should launch something that's a little bit embarrassing. If you have product market fit and people are desperate for what you want, as long as you're launching something that people really want or need, I would tilt towards going earlier because I took way too long. I was too conservative in the space. Part of it is because we were going to be used in the operating room and I wanted to make sure it was safe. So that was a bit of conservatism in our case. But Ilya, in your case, with your hardware especially, you have a component. He's got a fantastic company called PackSafe. You guys should all check it out. I'd say you want to find safe ways of launching when you're slightly embarrassed is the way to go. And there are ways where you can get a toehold or get into a space that are less risky. And if you look at it, all the great companies have done this. They found their way of getting in on that one niche that isn't quite what they ultimately became, but it's their way of getting in and servicing a fantastic need. The other thing I want to say about this is that back to that question of product market fit and where do you need to be. Steve Case, I heard Steve Blank, I heard a fantastic thing they said the other day, because he's the guy who's like, get out of the office, go do customer discovery. Ultimately, it came down to, at the end of the day, he's like, yeah, but I would always sneak, and I would sometimes bring my prototype and put it in their hands, and I would look to see if their eyes dilated. So Ilya, back to your question, if your customer's eyes get a little bit dilated when you give that product to them, even if it's imperfect, I think you're good enough. And in Toggle's world, I saw that eye dilation earlier, and I wasn't confident enough in it to move forward more aggressively. When you see and this is where in-person is so important, if you can see their eyes dilate, like, holy crap, that makes my next promotion, or that gets me a little bit more money, or that takes me a little bit further. If you could do those things and you see the eyes dilating a little bit, you got it. You may as well start selling it or start working it.
Fantastic. Jake, that just gave me an idea, and I'm not the one to develop this, but if somebody can figure out how to track and measure that eye dilation on these video calls, oh my goodness, man, there would be a market for that.
Well, yeah, and I think it'd be great for dating apps too. Just imagine, It's like, is this person really into me? Oh, their eyes dilated. Okay,
Yeah.
good. So yeah, there's all kinds of uses for this.
For sure. Well, it is right at 1 o'clock. This hour has gone by so quickly. And Jake, I can't thank you enough for taking time to come here and talk with us today, because this really
Thanks,
has
Adam.
been a master class about entrepreneurship, how you approach startup. I mean, this has been fantastic. So thank you for taking the time to share this with all of us today. I also, again, want to give a big shout out to Amplify. They are our annual presenting sponsor, and they're making a lot of things happen, and we're looking forward to what's going to be coming down the pike in 2020 and 2021. I can't wait to where we can gather again and do this in person.
So Adam, I'm sorry, before we leave, I just have to say one thank you to you, because I started following you on Facebook, and you're doing this man cave workout thing that has actually inspired me to get my butt up and start working out again. What you guys can't tell from Adam is he does like 400 push-ups at a time and things like that. So no, it's fun, man. I love seeing your personal journey on that. So thanks for being an inspiration there.
Yeah, you're welcome, brother. Well, listen, everybody, just be looking for more information about what we've got coming up in August for Startup Grind. We've got some exciting stuff. We've got a pitch battle that's going to be coming. So the leadership team for Startup Grind, we're actually meeting next week, and they're going to be having more information about that. So thank you all for being here today. If you have any questions or anything we can do to help you, let us know.